So back then, Christopher was doing a lot of drugs, as I mentioned, most of us were. But he was so shit-faced at one point. First of all, it was this whole chase driving movie, and we could never have him in a car actually with the car running because it was too dangerous. So all the scenes with him driving were either pushing the car, towing the car, faking that the car's moving. It was hilarious. But so anyway, so at the end, he gets shot. He's walking through Times Square, and it's like he's covered in blood, and he was so fucked up that he couldn't walk. I know he's not like this anymore, so yeah. I'm a little guilty telling
Christopher Walken walking.
So I had to hold him and walk with him, but it was so crowded that no one could see that I was holding him. So I was I had my head down. I was just holding him with my arm and just walking, and he was just like weaving his way through Times Square. And it worked. Amazing. It totally works.
Hey, welcome to another episode of 2020'd. Thank you for continuing to come here. We hope that you have subscribed, and that's how you found out about this episode and all future episodes and past episodes. Please go check all those out. I'm here, as always, with my co-hosts, Siobhán Cronin.
Hi, everyone.
And Benny Goodman.
Well, hi.
Hi, my name is Cory Peza, and we are going to get into our second hour with the incredible Drew Ann Rosenberg, incredibly illustrious career in the filmmaking industry.
She talks about, having to literally carry people like Christopher Walken. You can hear it, but like carry him. So when you think you're seeing a scene, it's not the same anymore. Listen.
Yeah, getting to see the real behind the scenes of some major movie productions and how the unique things and experiences that come up with that.
There was so much blow in the 80s. Steve Stevens taught us that, but man, Drew really fucking hammered it home.
But it's amazing. She's such a down-to-earth person, yes. For someone that works in Hollywood, not high-strung at all, like just very chill. She talks about her yoga, like, her lifestyle. I mean, and that aside, just so many different angles of cool experiences that she's had with some of the major names in Hollywood that you've heard
casual about, like Woody Allen and George A. Romero and freaking everybody that's literally ever mattered in all the best films that she's a part of. And there's multiple ones.
Ben, you're our resident encyclopedia. You have such a great memory.
I watch IMDb like it's a show.
Well, you should definitely check out Drew Ann Rosenberg's IMDb and just be amazed at how many productions she's been involved in.
And while you're doing that, subscribe and like 2020-d.com. People ask, like, how do you get onto the show? How do you listen to it? You go to 2020-d.com because everything's there, from Amazon to Spotify to whatever fucking thing you're allegiant to. It's all there.
Okay, Ben, calm down.
You can also buy a t-shirt with our faces on it, which is super weird. But if you guys want to do it, I will support that decision.
And if you're new here, go back and listen to part 1 with Drew Ann Rosenberg. Here we have part 2, but we've got a whole roster of incredible guests from previous episodes, so check it out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, all of the people who stuck around to keep listening to this podcast, we're back for another edition of 2020'd. I'm Siobhán Cronin. I'm here with my good friends and cohorts, as Benny likes to say. I've got Benny Goodman.
Hey.
And you criticize me for using hey. And Cory Peza.
I'm just happy to be here.
No, I'm actually a horse and a cow simultaneously. Right. I've reached the highest level of Taoism.
Congratulations.
And we're back for part 2 with this incredible guest. We've had a lot of fun talking to her in part 1, so go check it out if you haven't yet. We have Drew Ann Rosenberg, who has some incredible stories. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking around to talk to us more.
Well, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Woo.
Of course.
And we're so thankful that you have an awesome internet connection, because even though you have an unbelievable house with a beautiful view right behind you, not that you're showboating or anything, you're amazing success. So for those that don't know, maybe you're just tuning in now, but Drew Ann Rosenberg is the assistant director to so many incredible. She's a producer, she's a singer, she's a writer, but
multi-talented.
But as far as what's bringing home the bacon, unless you're a Jew and then you're keeping kosher and it's treif, it's the fact that she's an assistant director on all these amazing films like LA Confidential. We were talking about Philadelphia. She now is working with Grey's Anatomy, has worked on Shameless, The L Word. I mean, literally the Ghostbusters. Just so you know, Drew, on my wall, I have a full blown, because you can go on to Google and Google Vigo the Carpathian. You can get a 5770 by like 6,000 DPI picture from the movie Ghostbusters 2 of Vigo the Destroyer, Vigo the Carpathian. And I printed it out so that every time I work out in my house, I get to watch Vigo.
It's good motivation.
What was it like working with Harold Ramis?
Those guys were great. There was, back in the days when we shot Ghostbuster 2, they didn't have the visual effects that they have now. Everything.
You don't say.
Yes. Everything, sorry, I just grabbed a peanut while we were on break.
Sigourney Weaver was still hot then, right?
Yes. So it was like it was much more complicated doing visual effects and everything. And so we were doing this scene where the Ecto Blaster, is that the name of the car? The Ecto something. You were Benny.
Ecto 1.
Yes, was, rushing up Fifth Avenue, and we had to lock up like 6 blocks of Fifth Avenue, and it was really hard to do. It took us like 10 minutes to shut down the whole street. And back then I was a second assistant director, and I was in charge with the lockups. I had like 50 PAs working for me, and we're finally ready to go. We get the go ahead. We lock down the street. I think I was exaggerating. I think it took like 5 minutes to shut down the street. And then all of a sudden, so I go, okay, stand by. And all of a sudden I hear this, Drew. And I was like, yeah. And my friend Sid said, we lost Bill. This is Bill Murray. I was like, okay, where's Bill? And she said, well, he said to tell you he went to get a piece of pizza. He'll be right back. So that was the Ecto Blaster, but he was really nice. They were all really nice.
Maybe someone was supposed to keep him on set and they didn't use the magic word, Drew.
Yeah, well,
Hold on, but do you know what the magic word is?
It's not please? What is it?
Please.
Yeah.
The magic word is please. That's an exact quote from Ghostbusters. I just watched it the other night. It's one of my favorite freaking movies ever. I'm a scientist.
You liked 1 though. 2 was kind of lame, right?
No, I love all of them. No, listen, kind of lame. Okay, Evil Dead, really lame. Also love it. There's a difference between movies that try to pass off as being like seriously good works of art and they're just terrible. And then there's movies that are terrible but works of art. And Ghostbusters 2 is a terrible work of art because first off, Rick Moranis is awesome. This nigga just walking around talking like this. It doesn't matter what he's even saying. It's great. 1.
I would
2,
agree.
Harold Ramis by himself, period. 3, Bill Murray. The Tao of Bill Murray alone. Dan Aykroyd, who does believe in all the Ghostbusters stuff, okay? And I don't care, because you want to know what? I was a child when Ghostbusters 2 was 87, 88 came out, and I loved it. And now going back at 38 and watching it again, I still love it. Whereas I've gone back and watched a lot of movies where I was like, okay, I get it. Like, this movie's good, but like, I don't think it's as good as I remember it being. Like, you go see a movie like It, like, you're like, oh, Jonathan Land, like, this is going to be a great movie. No, it's not. Tim Curry's amazing as a clown, but everything about that movie is literally horrible.
Are there any movies that you look back on, ones that you worked on, where you maybe rewatch them or come across a scene and it brings you back to that day of like something interesting that happened or a crazy story? You're like, oh my God, I can't believe that, I forgot about that.
Well, this isn't a crazy story, but when I just rewatched Philadelphia for the first time in many years, I saw myself in the movie. I totally forgot I was.
You were an extra?
Yeah, it was in front of the courthouse when the news reporters are there waiting for them to come out of the courthouse, and I'm standing up in front trying to. Oh, and then another this is a good one. Did you guys ever hear the movie King of New York? Christopher,
Yes.
I mentioned it before.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Christopher Walken, and
You don't say.
Yeah.
Well, what's it like to work with Christopher Walken?
Whoa. Continue on with your story.
Let her
Don't listen to
finish
Ben.
your story
I love
first.
Christopher Walken.
Well, this will segue into what you're asking me, Benny. So back then, Christopher was doing a lot of drugs, as I mentioned, most of us were. But he was so shit-faced at one point. First of all, it was this whole chase driving movie, and we could never have him in a car actually with the car running because it was too dangerous. So all the scenes with him driving were either pushing the car, towing the car, faking that the car's moving. It was hilarious. But so anyway, so at the end he gets shot and and we stole a lot of the footage.
Is that usual to be able to work around someone's alcoholism?
I was just going to say that.
Like, I don't mean to interrupt you. This time
Yeah.
I'm really curious. Like, you just basically said that, like, instead of making Christopher Walken drive for a movie about, like, literally having chase scenes, we're just going to fake every single scene with him ever doing anything because he's dangerous. That's the actual liability. Like, Tom Cruise will jump off a 40-story building, but we can't get Chris Walken to fucking go down a street without being fucking boozed up.
Well, I would say people are less tolerant now than they used to be. I mean, back then it was sort of more, I mean, everybody was doing drugs in the 90s. I mean, back then it was pretty common. I mean, about 6 years ago, I worked on a show down in Georgia, which is now my favorite state. And I had come in, they had fired a first assistant
Mine's
director.
consciousness.
Yours kind of. So, so the producers talked to me and the director. We had just shown up to do a new episode, and they were like, "Look, we just have to give you one piece of information. Do not worry. X actor, who will remain nameless, is stoned all the time. He stinks of pot. He has told us, do not even try to ask me to be sober or not sober, but not stoned because I can't function if I'm not stoned." So
Sounds like one of our co-hosts.
it was just
Accurate.
given. He was just always stoned, and it was like okay with everyone. And then we had this older actress come in who was like in her 80s, who was like this famous star way back when. And she came in one day and sat down next to him. She goes, "Woo, you smell funny." No, you know, that's the way it was. It was just a given. But anyway, so the story I was going to tell you was that at the end of the movie, he's walking through Times Square and it's like packed with people. We just totally stole the shot. And he's covered in blood. And he was so fucked up that he couldn't walk. I know he's not like this anymore, so yeah. I'm a little guilty.
Christopher Walken walking. Anyway,
so I had to hold him and walk with him, but it was so crowded that no one could see that I was holding him. So I was I had my head down. I was just holding him with my arm and just walking, and he was just like weaving his way through Times Square. And it
That's
worked.
amazing.
It totally worked. So.
And when you say you stole the shot, does that mean you just kind of did a guerrilla style? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. They also told us that we were not allowed to shoot in Penn Station, which is a big crowded. It was Port Authority. No, it was Penn Station. And Abel was fearless, I have to say. He was just one of those filmmakers that just did anything.
Before you had to get all the right papers stamped.
You were probably still supposed to do that.
We were still supposed to do that, and he was like, "Fuck it, we're gonna do it anyway." So we just
That's awesome.
strapped the camera on the cameraman Ken Kelch's back, and Harvey just walked into the station, and we just started following him. We stole shots, and we just got some great stuff. So the bigger the productions, the more, cumbersome all that stuff gets.
That leads me into a question I had. You've done these huge productions as well as smaller independent films, especially the ones that you've written and directed. Is there something you like more about one or the other in terms of just the atmosphere or what goes into producing something like that?
Yeah. I don't like the huge budget movies because there's so many egos that I'm constantly dealing with, and people aren't necessarily there because they believe in the project. They're there because they're getting paid a lot of money. There's something really refreshing about working on a movie that's low budget because people are doing it because they want to do it and they believe in the project for the most part. I mean, you reach a point of diminishing return, but the crews on the bigger budget movies are really, really good for the most part. But you can also get really good crews on smaller budgets. I mean, I guess my favorite are sort of the medium budget art films that are just sort of like character films, and like Philadelphia like Reversal of Fortune, those kinds of movies. Those are the ones I sort of found. Running on Empty. Those were the ones that I sort of found the nicest sort of balance between the two.
Sure. And in terms of you mentioned that like you're really good at kind of keeping the production flowing and wrangling everything that's going on. I know with bigger productions, it's deceptive how much time it can take to set up a 5-second shot. Just in my limited experience as an amateur filmmaker, music video producer, doing everything myself, it's so quick and easy if you're directing and shooting and everything like that. And then I've had some opportunities to work with slightly larger productions, and it's like frustrating to see how, okay, all right, we're going to relight the scene. Everyone go away for, an hour or two. And it's like, well, what if we just move that light real quick and just move the camera? Like, do you ever find yourself like battling that urge to be like, not half-ass something, but almost be like, is there a way we could maybe scooch this along a bit?
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, but you're not allowed to touch things that are not in your
unions.
Like God forbid I pick up a light or move something that the prop set out. And unions are very defensive about that because what they say is if you're doing my job, you're taking away the need to hire another person. So you're taking away work from my brothers and sisters in my union. Mm-hmm. So people can get really sticky about that. So it's really liberating not to have to worry about all that kind of stuff. And to give you a perfect example, I mean, nowadays, sound mixers always mic people. They put mics on them as well as boom them. And we were on this little movie, Gypsy Moon, that I was telling you about. And my director, Gigi, was like, wait, let's just grab the shot. And then the first AD turned and said, well, wait a second, the actors aren't mic'd yet. The actors aren't mic'd. And I was like, they don't have to be mic'd. We can boom them. But, you just get to the point where you have this mindset that it has to be done this way. You have to light a certain way. And you don't. And sometimes it's really nice to just throw all that aside.
How are you supposed to mix in an 11.3 surround sound if you don't have anyone with like an individual, like, because there's so many movies you see from the 80s, whatever, and all of a sudden the audio gets great and it's like, well, Margaret, that was really weird. And then you can see them like, they're not even matched up properly because literally, and then there's some people like Quentin Tarantino, like if you watch Reservoir Dogs, I don't understand what anyone's saying. I don't know why he doesn't care about what anyone says. They're all talking fast and all this going. I don't even know what's going on. And I don't know. And even with my surround sound system, that's all Martin Logan electrostatic speakers. I don't know what Steve Buscemi says to freaking Harvey Keitel in that movie.
Does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
No, but that's the point. They don't care because he probably was like, you know what? Just put a boom mic on him. Fuck it. I don't even care what they said. Just make them angry and shoot people.
Exactly. That's so right. Yeah. Sometimes it's nice to just mix the shit up a little bit and just let it loose,
Sure.
So you've obviously worked on movies for a while and, worked with actors from different generations. Have you noticed any distinct differences between I guess the thing that popped in mind was how social media might have affected what, it's like to work in the movie industry. Did you notice a difference between working on movies pre-2000s, pre-Facebook, pre-Instagram, and now this current era?
Well, I'm definitely conscious of actors' training and what their frame of reference is. Like I remember when I worked on this musical that I told you about with Chris Ashley. The first, we had a couple of weeks of rehearsals, and the first day of rehearsals, the two actors that starred in the movie, one was a big star on the West End, and one was a woman who won the Tony Award for Book of Mormon that year. And sorry, my cats keep jumping on the table. And I'll never forget, they showed up for rehearsal and knew the whole movie by heart. They were completely off book. Wow. Because, as a Broadway actor, you show up for rehearsals knowing the part. You don't show up and, whereas, nowadays we don't even have sides, which is the pages. The actors are looking at their phones the whole time. But,
right.
I mean, actors will show up and not even have attempted to learn their lines. And I just think Joanne Woodward would have never put up with that. When I hear about Meryl Streep, she would never have put up with that. I mean, there's just a certain discipline that I think has kind of fallen by the wayside because there's not a standard that's being kept up.
Do you also think that maybe that's affected by the medium of switching from like film to digital, where there's not that huge pressure to nail the takes because it's costing money every foot of film?
Yeah, and you keep the camera rolling. You don't have to cut.
Yeah.
It used to be when we were shooting on film that, you cut right away because film was really expensive. And now it's like, just keep it rolling, just keep talking,
Yeah, do you run into that where, the director or producer anyway might just start yelling out different ideas in the middle of a take just for alternate, versions of what's going on?
Oh, totally. And I remember when I worked with Sidney Lumet, we rehearsed on Running on Empty, which is a really good movie if you haven't seen it. We rehearsed the whole movie on a stage that he had taped out. The art department had taped out the whole stage, and we would do run-throughs of the movie so that when we showed up on set, the actors had a sense, because when you're filming a movie or a TV show, you're not shooting in order. You're not shooting in sequence. You're shooting mainly by location, or you're shooting out a particular actor. And this way they had a sense emotionally where they were from beat to beat, and he had planned everything out and he had recorded the rehearsals, and we would just come in there and nail it and knock it out. And nowadays it's like, especially in television, on some of the network shows I've worked on lately, it's just a little bit more, someone will yell something out in the middle of the take and it's more contrived in a way. So
contrived how? Like, explain what you mean by that.
Well, some of the shows that I've worked on recently have been more, well, in television, the writer is king. So the executive producer in television is the head writer, basically the showrunner. So it's really a writer's medium, and the directors who show up are really guest stars or guest directors who come in and basically have to articulate in a clever and creative way what the show is. The characters are already established. The visuals are kind of, this is the way we shoot. Shameless, we did a lot of handheld. I mean, that's kind of the style of the show. So you're not coming in and remaking the wheel. You're coming in and facilitating an episode and making it clever and good, but staying within what they want. And the writer of that episode sits on set and gives the director notes. So it's a very different process. When you're doing a movie, the director is king or queen. And it's really up to them to put the creative, to put the story together any way they want. Now, a lot of times when you go into the editing room, the producers will have final cut. So the film gets taken, they get a number of days that they're allowed to cut, and then the producers can come in and change it around, depending again on the dynamic of the director.
It's always so interesting just how many cooks are in the kitchen in a project like that. As far as, and this is something I've kind of wondered, you have a TV show like Shameless or any long running show where there's so many episodes that often have different directors, different writers, different, like there's such a rotating cast of characters behind the scenes. Whose job is it to make sure that the show maintains a cohesiveness? Well,
the writers, and then a lot of times the crew will do so, and the actors. I mean, the actors are more familiar with their parts than anybody. If the actors on a series don't like a director, that director doesn't usually come back unless there's extenuating.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Didn't Emmy Rossum do a lot of directing or something? I don't know the whole story or something like that, but she left Shameless and came back. Were you there? When were you in part of Shameless? Because, I mean, a lot of people obviously love that show. And for me, I was never even a William H. Macy fan until I watched that show.
Amazing.
And now he's like my favorite. Like, it's like Dan DeVito. After I watch Always Sunny, I'm like, that guy from Twins is like my favorite actor ever. But it's the same thing, William H. Macy on that show. But didn't Emmy Rossum have a lot to do with like how that show now goes down, or well, until it ended?
First of all, I know you're secretly in love with him. Well, I don't think
no, that's secretly. I do love Emmy Rossum.
Yeah. As the show gets more and more successful, the writers the actors get more power.
It's like Taylor Swift.
Perhaps.
Well, no, we were talking to John Garabedian, this amazing DJ, and he said that she stopped being as good same with Lady Gaga when they started going, it's me, instead of Red One or their producer or their director, because they have so much control. They're like, oh, Taylor Swift's like, oh, it was always my song, when it's like that dude in Sweden totally took your song and made it a number one. Is that what you're saying?
And it also, and I think it also confuses things sometimes, like Tim Oliphant. I don't know if you ever seen Justified, the series.
Yeah, I have.
Series. He started becoming more and more powerful on the show, and I thought he was brilliant as an actor on the show, but it's like he started weighing in on the scripts and getting involved in that kind of stuff, and he's not sitting in the writer's room coming up with the story arcs and figuring out, the through line of the series. He's just looking at an episode and going, oh no, he should do this at that point. But if you're a viewer and you're watching it from start to finish, that's why the writers have so much control, or at least it's out that way, because they should. There's this whole arc in television that doesn't exist in movies. And I think the actors tend to convolute that a little bit. I mean, not always terribly, but it doesn't feel like the right choice for me. And, it's as a director, and what I've found as a director, there are very few, if any, other people on set, because you're shooting out of sequence, especially, that are really following the through line of the story. They're just looking at it from scene to scene. It's like, you have to remember, where was the character emotionally in the scene prior to this, even though we shot that scene 2 weeks ago. So it's like there's this disjointedness that only a few people are really in touch with. And the writers, the way the writers work is they sit in a writer's room together and they brainstorm and they come up with outlines for the series. And then they assign different writers to write different episodes, but then the showrunner reads all the episodes and does polishes, usually, depending on how controlling the showrunner is, the head writer. So, there's a very calculated arc and, progression of the story. And if you're just coming in and looking at it as an actor or as a guest director,
well, it's so important that you say that, because when you watch a lot of these series and people are binging them now, there's a lot of subtleties and one-liners and way shots were done that you go, that's brilliant. But then if someone, like, if I can understand where a writer would be like, yo, dude, you don't know how they're going to feel at the end by this scene when you're at that location 6 months from now. And that only the subtlety and nuances of sticking to the actual script. So it's funny to me, because now I'm like hearing that there is almost like an inner war sometimes in movies and shows between what the writers envision and how it's going to be, like, executed. The directors and their sort of interplay as far as, how do I bring this story to life? And then the actual actors going, well, I want to say this on camera as my character because I'm this person, and they have this egocentrism. And then the dichotomy between movies and television is that movies, you can kind of fucking edit whatever you want, whereas television, they do have a very specific arc, and that if you don't get this foreshadowing or this done in these episodes, then it ruins the whole fucking point of this.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we had one writer take us aside and whisper, 2 episodes from now, she has a nervous breakdown. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's useful information
right.
for her to know, because she's got to lay the groundwork for that.
Woody Allen wouldn't do that. He would just give you a nervous breakdown.
Exactly. So I watched this great Australian series called Offspring. Have you guys heard of it? It's so good. We've turned on a couple of our friends to it. Everyone loves it. So like I'm going to, spoiler alert, in like the 3rd season, one of your favorite characters dies, and we're just like, wait, what? Just like out of the blue, gets hit by a car and dies. And literally, like, I'm up all night just traumatized. And then I start doing some research, and I find out that the guy got offered a big series in the US. So they had to kill him. So like sometimes stuff like that just happens because, or somebody gets fired and, for sexual inappropriateness or stuff like that, like all
that happens.
Obviously, sometimes it's just, life that got in the way of the story or whatever. But
as someone involved in the front end, as far as being there during filming, in relation to post-production and things like that, how often are you surprised, offended, or like, not super pumped with the way something that you helped create was transformed and ultimately presented to the world?
My last feature that I directed, I was pretty upset with.
Really?
Actually, one of the things that upset me the most was the sound edit, because I had put together this montage that I really was like what's the word?
Syncopation.
Thank you. Syncopating to the rhythm of the cuts and the rhythm of the music. And then when the producers got a hold of it, they just took all the music out and changed the music. So things like that. That's one of the hardest things when you're a director, is not having final cut. And I remember sitting next to Robert Altman at a DGA dinner thing, and he was talking about his last movie, The Gingerbread Man, that they just took, even if a director as famous as Robert Altman, who directed Nashville, among other things, gets his movie taken away from him, then you can understand how it can happen to you. But it's just like, things can get changed so drastically in the cut.
My background's kind of in editing, in the terms of, very short narrative and music videos style stuff, but I can see the power in it. And so anything that if I do a music video, if I direct that video, I'm going to edit it, because I've worked with other people, and I'm at the point now, because of bad experiences, where if I'm going to direct a video, I'm going to shoot it too, because I don't trust anyone to like actually do what I'm looking to get done. Why is that
whole scene completely out of focus? Why is Brian Pitcher running away and going, hey guys, let's get some pizza. Let's get some pizza.
Yeah, you're sitting there trying to explain what you want, and some people just either can't get it or they don't. I love Brian. Brian's a great guy.
Brian Pitcher too, but he's the giant.
Stop interrupting.
This is what he does during a set, though. He'll be like, David Ellefson, you should talk about this. We have the guy from Megadeth for 30 minutes, and he's like, hey, why don't you do... He doesn't even know what we're shooting, Drew. He doesn't even know what we're shooting it for, and he's like, you guys should totally cover this and this. Like, dude, aim the fucking camera!
Yeah, the point being, like, if you have a vision, especially like where you were saying you wrote, these movies, these features, and like this is your baby, and then you have to give it to other people and trust them with it. It's something that I have been forever scarred, and I will never be able to be a successful director, because I would never let anyone touch my stories to do that.
Well, no, the secret to that is you have to find a group of people to work with that you keep working with, that you trust. And once you have a connection with people, like I have a cinematographer that I love, that I will work with anytime I can. Now, he's very busy, he does other things, but it's like you find
He's not a director too, is he?
Say what?
He's not a director too, is he?
No, that's a great thing. He has no interest in directing whatsoever. He's totally visual.
Well, let him know we don't have any interest in him directing either. Fuck you, cinematographers. Make sure it looks good. Make sure it's shot well. Make sure it's the right aspect ratio. Make sure the key lighting is right. Make sure the background, it's at 2.8, 60 million, whatever.
But this is super interesting, because a lot of people we've talked to, I think that's a common thread among successful people in teams, is that, you find those people that you're able to delegate stuff that you trust to them, and you just continue to work with them. And that's part of like creating a successful project, is that team, and being able to fit into your places. You mean just send it to Cory? No, exactly. But that's
our
the thing.
Team. Just send it to
I
Cory.
will trust Cory to edit and mix anything. I don't want to touch it myself.
Right. And you can't see everything, especially when you're directing. There's so much going on. If you have two cameras at the same time, you can't be watching both at the same time. So you have to trust the people that you work with. And I know it's hard, Cory, because I certainly understand that. But, that's why you seek.
You trust his iPhones.
Yeah. No, I mean, and once again, like, obviously I'm not pursuing that path, so it's not something I'll have to worry about. I remember specifically watching a documentary on Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which those guys shot their pilot, with a little handy cam in their apartment, and got it sold and everything, and then they showed up after it was on FX or whatever, and the network's like, here's your crew, and they're like, but we can do this, we're good. And they're like, I don't know if I can. They're like, they were blown away by the fact that they had to hand the camera off and all this stuff. And obviously it's worked out pretty well for them, but I can totally relate to that in not just filmmaking or video aspect, but in music as well. It's weird, Siobhán, you do a lot of gigs where you're recording for other people. You don't know what's going to happen to your tracks after you send them off. Like, you could send them to someone, they could just absolutely destroy them, mash them up, and now your name's on something.
Oh, this happens in live settings too. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you show up to a gig and you say, "Hey, are you going to EQ my violin?" and it's some sound guy that you've never talked to before, and that's your sound. That person has
Siobhán,
control over what you're doing.
I have a personal question. Do you ever play with
Okay.
Rodolfo and then like one of his fucking weird jazz friends just throws down their guitar and you're just like sitting there with your string section? You're like, why is that guy running off? And then the bass player looks at you and he just goes, "It's just jazz, baby."
That's
hasn't happened to me with Rodolfo, but there was, I don't remember what, it was like some big show that I played a long
and just
time
real
ago.
quick, Rodolfo Zuniga was a guest on a previous podcast. Who's
Yeah, he's a
musician.
friend
The
of mine.
drummer
who's a
from
jazz
Julio
drummer.
Iglesias, but he's
Yeah.
much more than that, Drew. Just so you know.
I have been on stage though at a very big like fest. This was a really long time ago. I was just playing in a string section with like a big artist, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody in the band was like tripping on something and just walked off stage, just left.
But wait a
And the
minute.
guitar player had to sit, like just walked. It was like, okay, I guess I'm singing the rest of the show, and it was like a big show.
That's amazing.
You don't
was
know
like,
what? You know, I love that you're
okay.
so famous that you don't even remember if it was Trans-Siberian Orchestra,
It
if
wasn't
it was
Trans-Siberian
Andrea
Orchestra.
Bocelli, if it was Michael Bublé, Earth, Wind, and Fire. I feel like that's
don't
an Earth, Wind,
remember
and
if it was-
Fire kind of
It
thing.
might have been, but it also might have been a tribute band. So I don't want to
Are
quote
you
it
sure it
'cause
could have
don't
been
know
Earth?
for
I feel
sure.
like if it wasn't September, if it was October, maybe that they were tripping.
Tell me about the Queen's Gambit, though, Siobhán. What was that like? Where were you?
It was so I live in Miami, and the composer who did the whole score is based in Miami, and I had done, he'll often call me because he'll do a lot of stuff with software instruments, but he'll call like string players or different musicians to record the cues to make it sound more real. So he's called me like over the last several years to just, sometimes he'll have to do a proposal for a Netflix show. They'll say, "Oh, can you give us some samples of what music you think goes with this?" And so he would call me to do cues, and it was like about a year and a half ago. He called me and said, "Hey, can you come record some stuff?" It was like 11 p.m. one night. I was like, "Sure." He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm working on this thing maybe for this show. It's kind of about chess and all this." And it was like really early on. And so he's like, I think I don't know who was directing him on the music, but they're like, "Oh, I think they're going to go with this. Like, can you record some stuff?" And he kind of showed me a couple of the clips, and it wasn't until like it came out where he called me. He's like, "Oh yeah, you made it in the credits for the Queen's Gambit." Little did I know that I had just recorded like all the cues at his house like a couple of years ago.
Well, and you're going to be part of possibly a classic show of our time, because if it continues as it is, I mean, I certainly feel personally that of the shows last year, that was towards the very top echelon of like, sitting at home and everyone's literally binging stuff and you watch so much stuff. Like how is this number 3 on Netflix? But it is 2.5 hours of that. But then you watch the Queen's Gambit and you're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Chess is interesting, and and the music is so like, I mean, obviously knowing that Siobhán is really cool, but then I went and listened to it anyway, and I was like, even if I didn't know that Siobhán had done it, like this music is haunting. And I think that's another huge component of that television show, is not only is it a completely different subject done really well, but the music and all of that is very synergistic, which based on what you've told me between how production works with the director, with the writers, with the actors, seems like it's very hard to get all those things in tandem.
Well, even with music, like it's so interesting to me. That's why I've always loved working with composers, and why like I've always loved to do studio work, or like I'll go to people's houses and record cues, because I always want to learn about like what is the art behind like how you write a score for a film, because it's so interesting. When he was working on that, he did a lot of studying about like chess as a game and how it works and the personalities and the history. Like so much of it was like intellectual study.
Nerd.
No, but it was really cool because when you listen to the music, it's got the same like point counterpoint move that's in chess. So there's like a real like tie together between the actual motion of the music and the motion of the game.
When when she's looking up at the ceiling and imagining the pieces moving, the music that plays during that too. I just remember that those sequences were and so much of it is subliminal. I mean, if you're not a musician,
Sure.
You're just watching it. It's just so enhanced. I mean, I love the sound edit. That's one of my favorite parts of the process. Just the sound effects and the music and the levels that you're working with.
Well, Drew, you bring up a good point, because when I used to work at Best Buy and Circuit City in a different retail hell, okay, one of the taglines they give you, and this is actually a true story, and you can tell me otherwise, 70% of the visual audio, of the visual experience of a movie is the audio, and we used to do what they called a deselect demo, where you play like a scene from Jurassic Park at the time I worked there, like a 50-inch television was big. You'd play like that scene on the speakers on the television and be like, okay, and then you'd play it on like a 15-inch LCD because those existed then. And then you'd put it on like a crazy sound system and be like, how did that make you feel? And always, like 9 out of 10, it's like, oh yeah, well, when you have the $3,000 Bose, I say that it's not that good, but crazy sound system, that's a huge deal. And I can only imagine now you being, assistant director, a director, producer, that people don't realize how important the actual sound is. Because you just said that the reason you are upset about your film is because the sound edit sucked.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really true. It makes a big difference. So
Should have called Cory. I know a guy.
Yeah, you're right.
No, but it's that. I mean, that's so true. It's amazing because even like working with composers, like the composition and the music that you choose is one thing, but even like the way that they create the sounds is like a whole other thing. You could have the same music with a different set of sounds or like different mixing, Cory, as you know.
Well, how many times do I get angry at you, Siobhán, for not reading my mind too? Because like we just did a song, Drew, and
that's 90% of your life, dude. You get angry. You're always angry because no one read your mind.
He's angry, and I'm like, why? I don't even know what you're talking about.
The problem is, Drew, is that she's so good that I just expect her to always like do exactly what I thought. So the first time like on this song, she did totally not the right thing in my mind. So like I got mad at her, but then I was like, I'm sorry, like you just didn't understand what I meant, and by not telling you anything. And then the second time it came back though, I was like, this is what I wanted in the first place. Why didn't you just give me that? Like, this is exactly it.
It was literally like 2 pieces of information that I needed.
In other words,
it took 10 seconds.
Ben would be the director that you butted heads with.
No, I'm all about the character.
You'd sit back and go, I'm just going to wait for him to
I build her character all the time because Siobhán's so used to people being amazed by her that I'm like, no, but can you do it again?
Oh, no, that's not true.
And then I hook her up with Marty Friedman, who, if you don't know, was a guitar player for Megadeth. He sold 40 million records with them, I think, something like that. He's one of the greatest guitar players in the world, and he hazed poor Siobhán because he didn't know who she was. He's like, oh, this was just a string person. And he made her write things over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And the point is that we drag her through all the psychosis. And I just get mad when she doesn't understand my level of psychosis and isn't on my wavelength of weird. And if she doesn't get it the first time, I yell at her until she feels bad about it and then just does it right.
Siobhán, do you have anything you want to add to this?
I mean, there are probably lots of things I can
It's always right, though.
I quit.
It's always right.
No, but you're a classic micromanager because like you're very good with the overall creative vision, but then I think you have trouble like you truly delegating sometimes, But it's good.
I don't have enough people working on the set. If I had
because you're very particular about what you want. He's
a posthumous micromanager. He goes back and he's like, I wish I wanted you to do this. I'm like, well, why didn't you fucking say that?
I wanted you to shoot it on 8mm. You're like, dude, I just shot this with like Ari Alexa.
No, but that brings up a good point, which is I've heard some horror stories about some actors that I've worked with who have just been absolute teddy bears, and I think it just comes down to they're very, very demanding of themselves. They're very, very hardworking, and they expect the same from everyone that works with them. Jack Nicholson was like that, and Donald Sutherland.
Who? You broke up. Who?
Jack Nicholson was like that.
Well, you don't want to stumble on his name.
Yeah, and Donald Sutherland, I heard horror stories about him. Oh, don't anybody smoke anywhere near him. He throws a fit, and he's so difficult. And I loved working with him. He was fantastic. I mean, I had to be on.
You think it has anything to do with the fact that you're entrancing, smart, and beautiful?
No, I think it had to do with the fact that everything he needed and to make a good performance, I made sure was there for him. And the same was true of Harvey Keitel too. I mean, he was really demanding. Like he would make me put all the off-camera actors in place. And like if we were in a big crowded place and you didn't even see those actors, he'd want them all there. So
does he sound like all of his characters? He's like, okay, Drew, I want you to take John and put him over there. Like, is he?
I was wondering when we're going to get a Ben impression on this episode.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's always terrible. But like Harvey Keitel or even Christopher Walken, are they like that always? Is that really just it? Bill Murray, are those guys the cliches of themselves always?
Yes, they are. I would say definitely. So there you go. Do you guys know who Wally Shawn is? It's spectacular from Brideshead or from
I've heard
Brides. What is it? Brideshead. It's spectacular or something like that. Anyway, He's in Young Sheldon. I don't know if you've ever seen Young Sheldon, but wait, why am I bringing him up again? I forget. Oh, we were talking about
Princess Bride. You're talking about the Princess Bride, right?
He's not like that at all. He's like really very serious and soft-spoken.
Inconceivable guy, right?
Inconceivable. Yeah, that was. Thank you. Anyway, he's not like that at all. He's like a total, erudite, very bright. He went to Yale, and he's like very, soft-spoken and intellectual.
He's probably told. Did he tell you he was an erudite? Because I feel like that's something that people that go to Yale would say about themselves. I'm actually an erudite on Match.com.
No, I worked with
I'm turned on by other erudites.
I worked with him on Radio Days, and then I got to work with him again on Young Sheldon, and we became friends. And I looked him up, and his partner is a woman in New York who's a professor of literature at Columbia, Deborah.
Oh, wow.
And she's like an incredible writer. I read her book, but I definitely made a point of sort of like looking into them because they were both like really impressive, interesting people, I thought, and kind of civil rights kind of people, which I am as well. So we were sort of had a lot of things to talk about while we were waiting during lighting setups when we were waiting around.
Do you want to talk about it? Because if you're fighting for something, let's hear about it. Lay it on us, Drew.
Well, I'm a big fan of the Southern Poverty Law Center. I don't know if you guys know who that is. They were originally started down
Our
south.
listeners, I can guarantee you, at least most of them, don't know. So enlighten us, or them, or us, or all of us.
Well, this is a privately funded organization that hires lawyers to represent people that are being persecuted for their, whether they're minorities. They track hate groups in the United States and give that information to the government. So they're really an anti-persecution kind of organization that fights for civil rights and fights for humanity. So I really believe in them. They're a great group, and they do a lot of really good things.
Well, how can we help that group and find out more?
Just Google Southern Poverty Law Center, and you'll hear all about them. Morris Dees was the original founder. He was a lawyer down south who originally was a racist. He grew up in a very sort of white, privileged family, and something happened in his life. He's written books about his life and stuff that made him sort of understand that he was narrow-minded and bigoted. And he sort of like saw the light, if you will, and started this organization that just does great good for people. So
wow,
check them out.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Speaking of great day, what a day yesterday was. Holy shit.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. This
I will tell you, I don't know exactly what happened, Drew, because I was in the studio working on Skid Row, and then I came out and I saw my Facebook feed, and I saw things like Donald Trump had his Twitter feed shut off, and I was like, I don't want to know anything about this. And I
was in rehearsal all day, and I got up and like, what's going on?
And then I read another thing that said, this is the worst day in American history, and this is, honestly, I got to be real with you. At what point do you say, I don't want to know? And like, I don't think my liver can handle it at this moment.
Funny enough, just for our viewers and listeners, so we're recording this the day after that the Capitol was looted, Capitol building. But the reason I say that is because
idiots!
The reason I say this is because Ben just said, oh, this is the worst day in American history. We don't know if there'll be another one before this airs. So this was the worst day in American history so far.
Our beer, America. Or should I say America? With
America.
Yeah,
because we'll be in a different political climate when this episode comes out.
But don't you guys all know that it was Antifa? That it couldn't possibly be people that just hate things for no reason and that aren't organized enough to even have any kind of belonging other than hatred for things?
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck those people.
Craziness. And why
don't they light each other on fire?
We're now
save us all.
We're in 2021. It's supposed to be better.
You know what they should do? They should take all their fucking legal guns, all their AR-15s and the things that they fucking need to explode people, and go shoot each other and see how fast they can fucking kill the surplus population so we can stop having to drive Teslas and giving them a monopoly because we can keep putting smog into the world because we know fossil fuels are more important than running electricity as long as there's less people.
You want to talk like religions and abortion too?
If anyone listens to that, none of that made any sense.
What I was gonna say,
how crazy
outside, because I think it's great, the Southern Poverty Law Group, and you kind of expressed that that's one of your interests is in that like civil area. When you're not producing movies and working in cinema and everything, like what do you do for fun? What is your way to relax when you're not doing a 12-hour day on set?
I'm obsessed with yoga. I do yoga every day, even if I have to go to work at 5:30.
That's why she looks young.
6 in the morning. I do 30 minutes of yoga every morning religiously. It's
amazing. Good for you.
Yeah, it just keeps me sane. And we live up in the hills, and there's a great hiking trail down the road that we like to take our dog on, and that's just a few things to unplug, just to try to get away. In the middle of the pandemic, we actually went whitewater rafting in Northern California, just like drove up and joined this group, but we were isolated in our own raft, and just have to find ways to shut it all down. I think, it's just, it's such a stressful, intense environment on set. And then these past 4 years have just been so nuts with this administration. Thank God they're leaving. That we've just had to try to find ways to just kind of unplug. And
so that's interesting. When you were earlier on in your career, were you able to find that balance, or is that something you had to develop later on? Because I know a lot of people when they're younger and hungry, and they work themselves to the bone.
Lots of cocaine.
It's interesting that you say that, because I would go on this cycle where I would work ridiculous hours and just be working all the time. And then I would finish a job, because I was mainly doing movies back then, and I would just get sick because I couldn't get sick when I was working. And then when I finished a show, it's okay to get sick. And then I'd be sick in bed for like 3 days because I was just so messed up.
Yeah.
And it was not a healthy cycle. So I sort of had to find a little bit of a more healthy way of working and living. And one of the few benefits of this COVID time is that we are working less hours, which means that we have a little more time to be with our families and just kind of decompress a little bit. So that's been kind of good. So I really want to travel. I mean, my son just started college this fall. Now he's studying at home, but I had for the past bunch of years purposely not taken any shows out of town because it was just too hard traveling home on the weekends. But I had wanted to really start traveling again once he was in college. So I want to go, working on movies in other countries. I did this movie in Ireland and I worked in Budapest, is one of the best ways to get to know another country, because you're working with people from that area who are in the arts field. So they're generally interesting people, at least in my book. And it's just a great way to get to know another part of the world. So I really want to do some more of that. I want to go to South Africa. I want to go to Europe and work, and just want to work in different places, and maybe get back to doing movies just because I'll have a little more flexibility, or limited series. We'll see.
Well, you do yoga, so you should be able to get all the flexibility you need.
Exactly.
But speaking of that, is there a particular dream project or something that you haven't done in your career yet that you would love to do aside from going back to traveling? I mean, like something that's like your ultimate goal. Do you have something like that in mind?
Well, I'd like to direct a movie that's a historical drama, because I was a poli-sci history major at school, and I love history, and I like working on period films because I always do research when I work on them and sort of find out about the time period. And I come up with ideas, little vignettes I can put in the background of the scenes and stuff that have to do with that time period. And I would love to do a historical piece of my own. Just they're generally more expensive. I have this great script that my husband wrote called Buck Jackson that takes place in 1933 down south. So that's one of the ones I'd like to direct. We've got some interest in that, and
nice. Knock
on wood, hopefully that'll come up. I've got a couple projects in development as a director, and just generally.
Well, if you ever need any score, you can always call any of us, because we're just sitting around. Well, no, not Siobhán. Siobhán's not sitting around. She'll get the call from us in a panic. We need somebody who's going to make us sound good. And then Cory and I will go back and forth on the phone a million times, and I'll call Siobhán. Why didn't you read my mind? And then we'll send you the perfect score. and it will sound awesome. I promise you. I promise you will not complain about how it's mixed.
I'm sure I won't.
And if you do, his name's Cory Peza. You can see him right there.
There you go. There you go. I would love to. Let's hope. Let's do some.
Knock on wood for everything, because honestly, this year has to be better than last year. That's how I feel about it. And you want to know what? Like, I hope that whatever's going on right now is just like literally we're taking out all the toxins.
The death
like at the end of the Biore ship in the morning off Drew's nose. This is the end of 2020, and we're just like taking all of it and just wiping it off and then starting a whole new and forgetting about the fact that we've just completely set ourselves back 5,000 years.
God. Yeah.
And the Idiocracy has become an allegory / metaphor. That movie by the guy that did Beavis and Butthead.
Oh, yeah.
And
we watched
Borat
that on tour.
is a social allegory for what's going on. You know, when Sacha Baron Cohen, obviously a devout, method actor, and a movie like Idiocracy starring, obviously, the legendary Luke Wilson, with the legendary Mike Judge, like, is the most accurate thing out there to describe the insanity that's going on. That, Drew, you need to write a different film. You need to write a different film than anything that's going on right now, because it fucking weirds me out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there is going to be a big shift. I am so looking forward to not seeing that fucker on television.
I'm looking forward to seeing you in Vegas by Paul's pool.
Yes,
and we're all hanging out in the sun like normal people. And we could even share a drink. I could hand it to Cindy. You could hand it to Paul. And like maybe it's even a joint. I don't know. We're living on the edge now.
I'm there. Count me in. So,
we're coming up. We got a few minutes left. I've learned a lot. I think we all have. So I really appreciate you being on with us.
my pleasure.
And if things get back to normal, like, what would be your next step? Like, I think you seem to be at the point now where you can probably be selective about your projects. So like, what's the call that you'd like to get, next, in the 2021, 2022?
Well, I'd like one of my film projects to go. I'd like to be directing again. And I'm really excited about doing this music series, Daisy Jones, with Reese Witherspoon's gang. So I think that's going to happen.
That sounds
there's a
awesome.
bunch. One of the things about my world, it's probably true with your world too, is you always have to have like a bunch of different irons in the fire. You can't.
That actually,
Sure.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but I actually had a question written down that I wanted to bring up. In an industry like yours, where it's not a 9 to 5, you don't have, you're not getting a direct deposit paycheck, 52 weeks a week. How do you plan out not only your short-term time management, but your long-term time management, in the sense that, your project ends in 2 months, you have to make sure that in 3 months you have work, right?
And you could be sick then.
Yeah. Well, now I'm at the point in my career, and it hasn't always been this way, where I'm not really worried about, I get phone calls for work all the time, and I do have an agent. So I let my agent know I'm going to be finishing Grey's Anatomy beginning of April, and, start looking for me for something. And so a lot of it is just staying in people's memory banks, because so many of us, sorry, my cat keeps jumping up. So many of us have so many different relationships, and it's not necessarily that we wouldn't have wanted to work with you, but we just forgot, oh yeah, I forgot about her, or whatever. So you just kind of want to stay in people's memory banks. And I mean, I was selected last year by the DGA to be a mentored television director. Can
you tell the Gen Pop out there what DGA stands for?
Oh, the Directors Guild of America, which is...
I mean, I knew that, but it's one of those things that if you haven't been to downtown West Hollywood, you may not know what the DGA is driving by to the pot dispensary down the street, Seeing all you elitist directors walking out with your Mercedes-Benz and other German-made things.
Yes. Sure, fair enough. So, wait, what was I talking about?
So you were selected by
the DGA.
Yes.
The Directors Guild of America.
But why was I talking about that?
Because you were selected by them.
Oh, so I was it's a television directing mentorship. So I was trying to get more involved and trying to direct in television. And, a lot of times, so what some of the directors were saying was, keep a contact list of people to stay in touch with, which I'm not really organized, or I don't have the inclination to really want to do that so much, like write down and check off people's names and make sure to stay in touch. But I do try to, the people that I have close relationships with, that I work with, that I want to keep working with, I try to stay in touch with them. And of course, social media is a big, which I kind of hate, to be honest, but I try to update
It's a necessary evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, amysgiftfilm.com is my website, Amy's Gift, and Instagram and all that. Amy's Gift 2020. And, I update my directing reel and all that kind of stuff. So there's sort of a methodology to trying to stay in touch with people and trying to cultivate relationships. Because as we know, a lot of it's about relationships in both of our businesses, I think, in all of our businesses in the creative world.
Sure.
Sure.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Drew, because first off, we met in a very serendipitous-like way with our good friend, my good friend, Paul Geary, who loves you, and I know that it'd be great. But I love the fact that you, years later, first off, you've always been so kind to me in the sense that you've demystified a lot of things about the industry. You've always said, hey, listen, if there's any time I can help you with anything, which, by the way, there is. We'd love to score everything and do all the sound and everything that you ever do ever.
All right,
because
all
you're
right.
super
No more
talented.
shameless
This
plugs.
entire interview was
This
just
entire
set up the
interview
ask.
is a giant big ask.
No,
We don't actually have a show.
But we really just wanted to say thank you, because a lot of the stuff that, look, I even said this with the DGA, but like, you're talking about how things work, and you speak about it so knowingly that you almost forget that none of us see behind the curtain. And that's one of the things that we've actually, you said, what's the subtext of the show? It's kind of like removing the curtain. And, like for a guy like Cory was like, I'm so excited for this interview because I get to learn what this person actually does and what is their workflow. And it's like, you used to say it like, oh, well, it's obviously yoga in the morning and then Biore strips and then telling Nicholson to fuck off by 2 and then holding Christopher Walken up if he's too wasted by 7. Like, it's very, very
Cory,
cool.
feel free to reach out to me anytime. We can talk more.
Thank you. I might take you up on that.
No, this was like super interesting and you're so authentic and so cool. And like, I just love listening to you talk about like all these stories. It's just so cool, even for me, to see behind the curtain of an industry that like still seems so far away from me, even as a musician,
Well, I'm in awe of all 3 of you. You're incredible musicians and
Go on.
Yeah, it's true. I just, that guitar solo you did, Cory, and I was just, all of you, the solos each of you did on the Lost Symphony that I was listening to was.
I actually deliberately don't do any solos because everyone else is better. But thank you. I wrote it all and produced it. But I didn't solo because there's Siobhán.
Well,
And even
you
the bass
did a little
player.
bit.
Even the bass player has a solo.
You did a little bit, though. I saw you jamming
A little
it.
bit. Yeah, I did some things.
You got this life. You got your
I got a
epics.
little. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I have a little bit here and there.
You had other stuff to do. It was
Yeah,
fine.
other stuff.
So we will
thank you.
definitely work together someday. We'll definitely soon.
Starting in
Sounds great.
Vegas. I'm telling you, when this is all over, you gotta fly out from LA and we'll go to Vegas. And we'll hang out there. And I just want to clarify something. I love Emmy Rossum, okay? But Soleil Moon Frye, who I know was in one of your movies, Punky Brewster, she was my jam. And she's the original jam. Like, when you find the mixtape, like from back in the day, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I roller skated to this.
They're reviving that show. She's doing a remake.
Is she?
Well, not a remake. What's it called?
She passing the baton on to another Punky?
No, it's Punky grown up. She's starring the show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're still friends. I still talk to her periodically.
Well,
Nice.
I'm engaged, but if there's one person I grew up going, oh my God, it was I love Punky Brewster. She was like my childhood. And you're like, casually, we're at Park City, Utah. You're like, oh, I did this film with this actress Soleil Moon Frye. I'm like, I know who she is. She's my childhood.
Is your fiance? Is she a musician, or I don't know anything about?
She's way more noble than that. She's a nurse on the front lines. She goes and gives people medication that can't give themselves medication, and then she goes and reviews other nurses that don't know as much about things because she's smart. I honestly am not high enough pay grade to understand exactly what she does, other than it saves lives and it's way better than what I'm doing. She lets me know all the time.
I'm sure she's a saint if she's engaged to you. So.
She has a thing that says, actually, nurse is because she's a nurse because that's the only other word synonymous for angel.
It's very true.
All right, you guys. Well, great talking to you.
Thank
you so much. What
Drew,
a pleasure.
Just want to give a shout out to your website, drewrosenberg.com. And we definitely want to talk to you again. Thank you so much.
And if you need help, like updating your Instagram, we'll do it for you. Just give me the password. I'll put some stuff up. It'll be fine.
2020.
No, because you'll get riled up about something and post some angry.
Yeah, 2020-d.com 2020.
So obviously you're someone that grew up loving and appreciating music. What was it about radio that drew you into that versus perhaps wanting to be a musician, or somebody that's an actual like musical performer? What was it about radio that attracted you?
Siobhán, you're asking a great question. I thought about that. When I was a kid, I thought, well, be a singer. And then I thought, no, because maybe if I'm lucky, I'll have 3 hits. If I'm lucky. And then I'll spend the rest of my life singing those 3 goddamn songs over and over and over.